Joining us now is Ken Cuccinelli, and he is here to talk about the invasion happening on our southern border. Ken, welcome to the program. Yesterday there was some news that Governor Abbott signed a declaration of invasion on our southern border, but you have some context on that news. Walk us through it.
Yeah, what he really did is recycle a press release from July, and he pointed yesterday to his July executive order. He didn't issue a new one. And he said, look, I invoked this invasion authority, and I'll come back to that in a second. And look how tough I'm being. Texas is doing more than any other state, and that is true. But he is trying to give the impression that he's doing everything he can, and that is not true. And he has continued to do this throughout what they call Operation Lone Star. They always give them really cool names. Operation Lone Star. You picture your cowboy there on the border, right? And the governor gets photo ops, and he's been doing that for 18 months. And what's happened to the numbers entering Texas? They've gone up, not down. They will not go down until the governor returns people to Mexico, and he has constitutional authority to do that. I said I'd come back to it. This is in Article 1. If you look at the very end of Article 1 in the Constitution, it says that it lists things states cannot do. One of them is wage war, not surprisingly, but that has an exception. And the exception is unless you're actually invaded. And even Governor Abbott acknowledges we've been invaded, we're being invaded. So he acknowledges the condition. And so we're asking him at the Center for Renewing America, not just to admit you're being invaded and to blame Joe Biden, and it is supposed to be the federal government's responsibility, but the founders were wise enough to leave the states the authority to defend themselves. And Texas has that. We're not talking about tanks and planes. We're just talking about stopping people at the side of the river, ferrying them back across, and putting them in Mexico and saying, don't come back, in between the legal ports of entry. If people believe who are thinking of coming to America illegally and walking across Texas's border, across the Rio Grande, and they believe they're going to be returned back to Mexico, they won't come. And that's what it takes. Operation Lone Star, as I said from the very beginning, will not succeed unless and until Governor Abbott is willing to return people back to Mexico. And he has the constitutional authority to do it. And thus far, he has declined to use it.
So I guess a question that I have is wouldn't then he just be sued by some federal judge and would say that it's a little legally unprecedented?
Sure.
I mean, I'm all for it. So walk us through what would happen next then.
So in a different part of the Constitution, Greg Abbott correctly says, hey, this is Joe Biden's job. Well, if you look at Article 4, Section 4, called the Guarantee Clause, the Guarantee Clause has the federal government promising three things to states: to protect a Republican form of government, to protect state governments against insurrections against the state governments, and to protect all 50 states against invasion. And of course, not only isn't the federal government protecting the states against invasion, it is practically inviting the invasion. But in years past, over the last 30 years, states have sued the federal government for failing to protect them against invasion. And in 5 different appellate circuits, Charlie, the 2nd, 3rd, 5th, which is Texas, 9th, which is Arizona, and 11th, courts have all found universally that they don't get to decide that question. It's called non-justiciability to lawyers, meaning courts don't have the authority to address it. And the reason is that they all state is this authority is deposited with another entity in our constitutional system. And in Article 1, Section 10, it is very explicit. States can exercise war powers when they are actually invaded. And the courts have universally held that it is not for the court to decide whether there's an invasion. And what that means in this case is it is for Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, commander-in-chief of Texas, to make that